Good evening and welcome to the 2020 Emma Lazarus Statue of Liberty Award Gala. My name is Annie Palland and I'm the Executive Director of the American Jewish Historical Society, and we are here in the reading room of the Center for Jewish History. Tonight, we have a special opportunity to look closely at our collections and to see the stories that help us understand who we are and how we can move forward to build community in a troubled time. When COVID started and I wasn't able to come to the archive and had to be quarantined at home, I missed the archive. And I'm sure, like many of you, felt a little lonely and felt nervous about what the future held. So when I feel nervous, I look back to the past, and I went to our online portal and searched in terms like cholera, economic depression, and resilience. And I found an array of stories, some of which went back to the early 19th century, and looked at how American and Jewish communities grappled with the problems that were placed in front of them. One document in particular, gave me a lot of strength. And that was a document created by Lillian Wald, the founder of the Visiting Nurses Society and the Henry Street Settlement House. In 1918, Lillian Wald was working with the Red Cross to recruit women to fight the influenza epidemic. She cautioned in this flyer that they should not panic, but instead should find courage, coolness, and sacrifice. I think those words and that exhortation, in a way, gave us strength in those times, because even though many of us are not medical professionals, many of us understand that the problems facing this country and the city are not just medical, they're political and they're economic, and they're going to take all the energy and all the resilience we have to fight. Some of the examples in our archive show of people who fought and failed. Others show of people who fought and succeeded. And it's important that we look at all of these stories, and we look at all of these stories together, again, not just to draw energy, not just to draw resilience, but to build the community needed. In July, we returned to the archives, and we started work on our latest collection, that of the Weiler-Arnow family. This is a family whose roots went back to the early 20th century. They built the city, and they built the city skyline with their real estate business. But perhaps more important, and one of the things that shines through in their collection, is their philanthropic work. And especially exciting was the way in which we could see how this philanthropic endeavor passed from one generation to the next, as each generation responded to the issues at hand. We're thrilled tonight to give them the Emma Lazarus Statue of Liberty Award.
Jack started with nothing. My father lived through it, Jack lived through it, and these are people who really were not wealthy people. They were self-made, and they built New York. It changed everything. There was the pre-war buildings and the post-war buildings, and these were the guys who did the post-war building, and that they were starting from nothing.
You'd see a little bit more about his success in business, but that's not really the thing that's so important that I'd want to communicate to my grandchildren. It was his dedication and his involvement with people and causes around New York City, in many places in the United States, and certainly in Israel and other Jewish communities around the world. Many people look back to him as an example of how to give a lot more than money, how to give really your life.
The man was an absolute dynamo, a driven, passionate, fire in the belly guy who was just a mover and shaker from the earliest part of his career as an immigrant coming over to the United States and starting out hanging signs for a real estate company to becoming a major force in the New York real estate community and a major philanthropic force.
When it came to raising money for Jewish causes, he was unique. I mean, the Einstein College of Medicine, New York Board of Rabbis, I mean, he was in everything. Jewish Community Relations Council, I need a day to list all of the things that he was active in.
You know, here he was not a big man, standing about 5'4", maybe 5'5" on a good day, but he always was the center of the party, and so everyone was, you know, looking up at him from above. And I remember there was one photograph of Golda Meir, like him whispering in Golda Meir's ear, and she's sort of bending to hear what he's saying. He was a jokester, and I think he made everything in life more fun.
In his day, he was able to interact with large crowds of people around him and get them to give a lot of more money than they would have ordinarily.
He would take these cards and he would start calling the cards at a dinner with everybody present. And he would absolutely embarrass people into giving more than they planned to give. My father just had this way, this impish way, and say, oh, I know how much money you just made on this last deal. The least you can do it. And they'd make an announcement, oh, you can do more than that. That's nothing. How we got away with that is utterly beyond me. There were times when I just wanted to slide under the table and disappear. I was so embarrassed by what he was pulling. But he did it and they loved it. And it got great results.
He really felt like he was singled out for success because he understood that he had a tremendous responsibility to give back. And I think he really did have leadership abilities. He was a very compelling speaker, a very, very energetic person.
He led us down the path of being charitable and giving back and, you know, feeling strongly about New York City.
I've been working in the real estate business for almost 20 years now. I often will meet people that will hear my last name, and people will often ask, are you part of the Weiler-Arnow family? People tell me about the time that they met Jack Weiler, and more often than not, people are telling me not about some sort of business dealing, but they're talking to me about an experience with a philanthropy or with a charitable organization.
When you built this building, you built on the roof, I don't know what floor it is, 60th floor?
50 stories.
50. You built
The highest sukkah in the world.
a sukkah.
Shar HaShamayim.
Can you believe that? Shar HaShamayim means the gate
Gate to heaven.
Just seeing this incredible structure made out of natural trees and things hanging from the faux roof and all these people dressed up in suits, and it felt otherworldly.
This unique experience, the Sukkah in the sky, high over New York.
Watching my grandfather, his charisma and his leadership, he created this house on the roof of a building.
I mean, everybody wanted to go to that Sukkah. All of the organizations had fundraising events there, and every politician in the city had to show up there and be photographed.
One of the amazing things about Sukkah in the Sky was that it had many different atmospheres because so many different organizations seemed to use it. It held a quality of Jewish space that no other place held. I think a sukkah, in the way that it's vulnerable and open to the sky, really showed the principles of democracy and social justice in Israel that were vulnerable.
My grandfather was definitely, he was on the side of open-mindedness. He was on the side of understanding that you could be pro-Israel in a lot of different ways. There was not one way to be pro-Israel. There was not one organization that had the monopoly on support for Israel. He understood that.
And in 1972, the celebration involved Mayor Lindsay of New York at that time, and my great-grandfather, in the middle of this event, invited 8 of the construction workers who had built the sukkah into the event, and they all celebrated together to bring these people from different walks of life together. And that's not something you see so often anymore, unfortunately, and I think that that's something that stuck with me.
A sukkah, this Jewish symbol, in a not especially Jewish setting. It was like the mixture of these two worlds, of the Jewish world and the secular world. Looking back on it, I realized that that was exactly the point. The point of the Sukkah in the Sky was kind of a precursor to the modern phenomenon of public space Judaism. And it wasn't coercive or anything like that, but more in a really proud way to say, we're Jews and we're here and this is one of our symbols and we're doing it in a really interesting, modern, exciting, skyscraper-y way, and come check it out.
We're really lucky, and you have to give back publicly and privately. To me, that's the family legacy. It's not the real estate business.
It is a through line, in terms of being generous and, helping out less fortunate people.
My great-grandparents gave back to the city of New York through a garden at the Central Park Conservancy. The garden was a gift from my grandpa Alan and my great aunt Joan to their parents on their wedding anniversary. And it's amazing to see that it's something that to this day grows and brings so much life and joy to New Yorkers.
Makes me think about what my grandparents and then my father and my Aunt Joan, what they created and how it will live on.
Putting a sukkah in your yard is quite visible, and certainly putting it on top of a building is very visible too. So it's a statement in terms of Jewish identity of willingness to kind of be out there in public. I think it's important for Jews to remember that being out there in public is where we need to be.
The legacy that my great-grandfather and great-grandmother and really my parents and aunts and uncles have all really perpetuated, there's been a real consistency in trying to improve the world. And improving doesn't just mean feeding people who are hungry, but also trying to change systems that perpetuate poverty and oppression. What that looked like in the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s was very different than what it looks like now.
It's not time to be too worried about tending our own garden. The garden of America needs to be tended, and the garden of all of our communities. And that's the kind of language that I think that my grandfather would speak. When I say that, it's almost like I feel him saying those words.
The joy and the satisfaction that you get out of helping others is not equaled anywhere else. It can't equal it, the joy and the satisfaction you get on creating and doing. I always say, I've been blessed so I can do more.
When my father passed away, we came into a lot of his personal files and correspondence with all sorts of dignitaries. And it should all be in one place for the future generation.
Some of the photos in that collection of my grandfather with Robert Kennedy, my grandfather, with Golda Meir, that's the kind of stuff, that's history right there.
I was always fascinated with photographs as a child, and in my house we had these thick books that we called the red books, filled with black and white photographs from the 60s and 70s that my grandpa Alan took. You can see how you're part of this much larger web. And that just equips you, I think, with more motivation for how to live your life.
If Gramps were alive today with all the technology, he would spearhead this, but his spirit lives on through Sarah. I think there is something about keeping everything. The physical things are stories. They're all stories. Every little scrap, every little receipt, it has a story.
One of the ways that my great-grandfather brought Jewish life to our family was through Zmirot, through these table songs on Friday nights.
And that would go on for those Friday night dinners were long, with a lot of singing. And that our family, when we get together for Friday night still, we sing those songs together. My grandfather was a figure of some historical stature. There's no question about that. The story of his life is an immigrant's life who succeeded, who gave back in an enormously powerful way. So to be able to share that with others, that is a great joy.
Nita and I are honored to be part of this celebration of the life of Jack Weiler and the contributions of the Weiler-Arnow families to Jewish communal life in America.
We are especially proud of our longtime friends, Alan and Elaine Weiler. Steve has known Alan since they both attended Columbia Law School 65 years ago. Elaine and Alan are both dignified and unassuming, warm and charming, and extremely well informed. We were also fortunate to know Joan and Bob of blessed memory and cherish the time we spent with them at their home in St. Martin.
It is altogether fitting that Jack Weiler's peerless leadership of the American Jewish community for so many years be memorialized in the archives of the American Jewish Historical Society for decades and centuries to come, to be an inspiration for future leaders and scholars.
Congratulations also to the younger generation of family members. I wish that we could be with you today in person to give hugs and kisses to you all.
The American Jewish Historical Society is not stagnant. We are always open and seek out new important collections, plural, or even singular. But one of the things that we are most proud about now is what we are bringing into the AJHS, which are the papers of one of the most important women in our era right now. We are accessing the papers of Nita Lowey, a congresswoman from New York, after she had been in Congress, and she's retiring at the end of this year after 16 terms in Congress. She is leaving as chair of the Appropriations Committee, and she has been one of the most important women in American political affairs since she's been in the Congress. And it's important for the American Jewish Historical Society because it is our first major accumulation of papers from a very important American legislator who, not coincidentally, but importantly, is Jewish.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Bracci, the Director of Programs and Operations at the American Jewish Historical Society, and I'm here in our immersive exhibit, which recreates the room in which Emma Lazarus wrote the new Colossus. Now, we first welcomed people into this space a year ago at the 2019 Emma Lazarus Statue of Liberty Award Dinner, and tonight we are very excited to be able to present that award to the Weiler-Arnow family. But there are 3 more winners we need to present awards to tonight. The winners of our Emma Lazarus Statue of Liberty Poetry Contest. This exhibit and a much broader project that incorporates a curriculum and a poetry contest sprung from the Emma Lazarus collection and from our archives. Because Emma Lazarus lived in a very complicated time where the issues of anti-Semitism, immigration, as well as inequality swirled around her and were hotly debated at Union Square just a few blocks from here. Emma Lazarus engaged with the world around her and responded through writing. Her activism was her writing, and so we use her story and her experiences as a springboard for helping students understand how to respond to their own times and how to find their own voice. Now, just a few weeks after welcoming the first group of students into this space, we were no longer able to access this space due to COVID-19, but we quickly adapted those resources that we had spent so much time crafting to create a new virtual program series called Meet Emma, in which students and families had the opportunity to engage with an actor portraying Emma Lazarus. And through the power of Zoom and green screens, they were able to travel back in time into this room to engage with her about the world that she lived in, as well as those issues that she faced in her time. We launched an adult program series of poetry salons where every Tuesday night, adults from across the country would get to not meet Emma, but would meet Lynn Melnick, a wonderful poet and teacher who would engage them around Emma's story, introduce them to contemporary poets, and inspire them to write their own poems that offered their vision for America today. Through adapting, we actually found new opportunities. And I think that's reflected in the poems that we received through this poetry contest. All 350 of the poems that were submitted to this contest are going to now be a part of our archive. And I think in many ways capture this moment in time that we have been living through. And throughout this evening, we have been returning to our archives and returning to this idea that these archives offer us inspiration to do the important work that needs to be done in this country today. And so I'm excited to be able to share with you the story of Emma Lazarus. I hope that you are able to find inspiration in it, as well as inspiration from these poems that were written by these students, responding not only to Emma Lazarus and the poem that she wrote for the Statue of Liberty, but responding to the issues that they see in the world that we're living in today.
Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free.
We've been thinking more and more about Emma Lazarus and her legacy, is that a lot of people really don't know who she is. She's most famous for writing a poem called The New Colossus, which is now inside the Statue of Liberty. And as we were exploring her biography, we were able to see that she led such a complex life that actually sheds light on the complications that I think we're living through today. So we thought looking at how Emma dealt with these issues would be inspiring for a new generation.
This poem is saying, no matter where you're from or what your circumstances, there is no such thing as a good immigrant or a bad immigrant. Everyone deserves to be here. And I think that that idea, that very idea, is radical. It was radical then, and I think it's radical now.
Emma Lazarus was born in New York City in 1849.
She was the fourth of 7 children, so she grows up in a lively household, one in which education was valued, so she most likely was tutored in her library. One thing that happens in the course of her lifetime is that there's actually an uptick in anti-Semitism. There are people who are saying Jews as a class, Jews as a whole, are X, Y, and Z. And so there were a lot of stereotypes, just as there were stereotypes of many immigrant groups at the time.
She had been writing about Jews, she had been writing about her own ancestors. And when the pogroms happened in Eastern Europe in 1881, Emma Lazarus was already churning with the questions about how to be a modern Jew and what it meant to live in 2 worlds. She was the first famous American Jew who had to invent her own way of being Jewish.
But for her, first and foremost was kind of the connection she had to Jewish people that she achieved in part through her study. She read lots of history. And also the sense of connection she had to Jews, even if they came from very different class backgrounds or they immigrated from different places. She felt a sense of connection and felt obligated to help newly arrived Jewish immigrants.
It was, we could say, a life of tikkun olam, a life of repairing the world, a life of a Jewish mission, but it wasn't a life of religious observance. So she had to think outside the box. And I think her way of life resonates with our contemporaries.
In many ways, Emma was always an activist. And I think in some ways that activism comes out through her poems. Emma Lazarus responds to the arrival of many East European Jews who are coming in large numbers.
So she threw herself into the cause of welcoming and caring for and educating and finding jobs for Eastern European Jewish immigrants. Even more importantly, she became an advocate in her writing.
There's a phrase that she wrote that has been used by other activists, which is, until we are all of us free, we are none of us free.
When we think about proving one's worthiness to be accepted into this great nation, Emma Lazarus was saying, it does not matter. We welcome any and all.
After Emma Lazarus' death, the New Colossus sort of fell out of the limelight until 1903, when her friend Georgina Schuyler was looking for a way to memorialize her and came up with the idea of making a bronze plaque and affixing it to the Statue of Liberty, where it can still be seen.
Over the years, I think the poem has become a lot more complex. Is it long and inclusive of every single struggle we've ever seen in this nation? No, but I think that there's a kernel of truth for everyone to sort of identify with something in that poem.
Knowing something about the context in which Emma Lazarus lived and wrote, it helps us to see what a remarkable poem it is and what one person can do to change the conversation.
who is yearning to breathe free, right? Who's been huddled, been poor, been those masses? Who gets to define freedom in America? Poetry is inclusive. There isn't borders or fences in poetry. Everyone has a voice, and I think everyone should feel free to use that voice.
Hello, I'm Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, and I am really thrilled to be here with the AJHS community, here to support both the important work of these historic archives, as well as to help honor the Weiler-Arnow family. I have known the Arnows in Scarsdale since before I was a rabbi, and I had the honor of helping teach Noah when he was in my confirmation class, and he's gone on to become a rabbi, so I feel pretty good about that. Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here, and in particular to honor the work of Emma Lazarus and her incredible poem, The New Colossus, which was written so many years ago for the base of Lady Liberty, and it feels maybe perhaps even more relevant as a message for us today. I love the fact that AJHS has inspired a new generation of students to look at the words, the prophetic words of Emma Lazarus, to be reminded that our country has always been a haven for the homeless, tempest-tossed, those who have come to these shores looking for better opportunities, just as my ancestors had, and have found it in this incredible country. And so we ask these young people to look again at how her words might be renewed for the next generation. And I am so excited to be able to announce the winners of this year's contest. In the middle school category, Sophie Goldenson of the Hunter School in New York City.
For all her storied strength, Lady Liberty weeps as she stands, as what she symbolizes is crushed to dust in politicians' hands. She cries, for she can no longer shelter the exiles and immigrants as their truest protector. The strength of the government is one stronger than she, and she can't stop them, no matter how pressing the need be. Behind her expressionless mask lies a face of frown lines and sorrow, as she is forced to worry for the refugees' uncertain tomorrow. She hopes for a brighter future where America will, at last, have a chance to return to its open-armed past. But for now, she stands sobbing, one thing clear. She is the shell of an era past, an outdated souvenir.
So can someone remind the class who was Emma Lazarus?
At the end of our AJHS Emma Lazarus unit, our teachers just gathered us to recite our poems. I think it's really just sort of humbling, if that makes any sense. There's not a lot of projects or times where every student just opens up in the way that they did that day. Everyone took it seriously, and everyone had something interesting and unique to say, which really surprised me. I was not expecting that level of thought out of everyone. It just made me hopeful that when given these deep questions and this legacy of this incredible woman, everyone really stepped up to the challenge, and just there's so many poems that were so affecting and so moving. I was blown away.
When COVID hit, the American Jewish Historical Society submitted an application to the National Endowment for the Humanities, who created a new grant with the help of the CARES Act to support humanities positions in nonprofit organizations. We were lucky enough to receive one of those grants, and with that grant, we created a new series called Live from the Archives, in which we spotlight different archival collections and bring archivists, historians, and special guests to interpret material live in front of a Zoom audience. We're going to bring you that series tonight in an abbreviated form, and you're going to be able to see some of our collections. Inspired by David Arnow's words, when you put a sukkah on top of a roof, it's a public act. And that's what American Jews should be doing, acting publicly, not just tending to their own garden, but tending to the garden of America. With those words in mind, we picked a few collections that we think speak to broader American ideals and movements. We've asked our friends, writers, communal leaders, and board members to share their insight today. How are these documents and objects relevant to the moment that we're facing now?
As a historian, my work depends on the kinds of archival collections that the American Jewish Historical Society maintains. And one of the collections that's very much been on my mind this spring is that of the American Jewish Congress, founded in 1918 in order to represent the diversity of Jewish political ideologies, cultural ideals, religious beliefs. It really became very, very invested in the idea that Jewish rights in the United States would be protected as a matter of Jews' civil identity and not only their religious identity. The American Jewish Congress worked specifically through legal means. So to look through the archives of the American Jewish Congress is to find incredible correspondence and amicus briefs, some that went all the way up to the Supreme Court, having to do with protecting Jews and other groups from forms of discrimination in housing and education and employment. The American Jewish Congress has been on my mind in part because of the protests in the wake of George Floyd and the recharged national conversation about race and about civil rights. And questions that I think emerge when one looks at the archive from the perspective of today have to do with understanding both real activism that American Jews and various Jewish institutions and organizations took in the civil rights movement, but also understanding some of the constraints within which they were operating. So for example, we know that a disproportionate number of American Jews were very actively involved in promoting civil rights. We also know that some sat it out. But more than this, we know that American Jews, for the most part, benefited from programs such as the GI Bill or home lending programs that were offered not to African Americans, but were offered to other white Americans. But today, because of demographic changes, we also know that Jews of color are a really significant proportion of the American Jewish community. And this fact also stimulates a different kind of reckoning with ideas of how we teach the relationship between American Jews and American race and racism. To help us grapple with some of these questions, we turn to Ilana Kaufman. Ilana is the founding director of the Jews of Color Initiative, and she's a longtime history teacher. We shared with her a speech that Rabbi Joachim Prinz delivered in 1963 at the March on Washington. Rabbi Prinz came over from Nazi Germany in 1937, and in the speech, he offered an emotional and really compelling vision of what silence means when one is watching injustice.
America must not become a nation of onlookers. America must not remain silent, not merely Black America, but all of America. It must speak up and act from the president down to the humblest of us, and not for the sake of the Negro, not for the sake of the Black community, but for the sake of the image, the idea, the aspiration of America itself. I don't think the purpose of this piece, its time has come and gone. I don't think that's it. But I think in the past we would teach it like, let's talk about the Jewish role in the civil rights movement, and we might offer this speech as a primary source document to draw us in as students and to see ourselves as part of the Jewish response to civil injustice and the lack of civil rights for Black folks in the United States. But now I think the invitation is to see it as a historical document and to analyze the structure and cadence of Rabbi Prinz's presentation, and to talk about what does it mean to use illusions from slavery and classroom of diverse Jewish students. Like, what does that bring up for you? And is it the same as slavery or not the same as slavery as we understand it in the United States? In there, it talks about kind of like the plight of the Negro and the invitation for the Jewish community. Like, what's the contemporary application of this piece in response to like thinking about Black Lives Matter, right? Like, how could we use this as an invitation and inspiration in contemporary times based on like the killing of George Floyd? And what is the call to action that we can extract from this and use in this moment? Like, I think what a very cool opportunity to do a curriculum design. Like, there's more to the story now, and that's what I don't think we get right as Jews when we teach the civil rights movement kind of in a global way, as we haven't moved on from kind of our role as talking about it as people of color as the other. And now that there's no longer like an us and them of kind of white folks and people of color, but like we're a multiracial community in a multiracial community. We don't need to be heroes. We need to be part of a community where everybody gets to win.
In the high school category, Kevin Kong of the A.W. Dreyfus School of the Arts in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Lady Liberty Reimagined. After Jules Verne. Having won the lottery, Lady Liberty goes out for the night. Her heels click on the concrete, her dress exot blue. Overhead, the starry wallpaper she's always dreamt of peeling. She wonders, outer space and 4 leagues beneath, how all it takes is the sharp barb of a fishhook to pull this nation up from the trenches, breathless and unseen, the last place without borders. Her fear like waves searching for something to crash against. She tears through a pearl brokenness, hair loosening in a sea of taxicabs, that the nation and all its bodies should rise like this. Now she pretends to be feral under skyscrapers with golden names, until nothing, not even bitter fortune, can hold her. So for me, the new Colossus really speaks about kind of freeing those borders, and as like an immigrant myself, I find that this poem kind of sheds light on how we look at ourselves both as an American, but also retaining that cultural identity. And that's how my own poem really came to be. Lady Liberty is kind of navigating this new society and facing, these personal and social kind of constructs that are formed around her. For me, the poem, if it were to be placed on the Statue of Liberty, is to show kind of this next chapter in American society and how we can adapt and transition even during this time of uncertainty.
I've been reading the papers of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, or HIAS. Those papers really comprise one of the most historically significant collections that AJHS holds. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society was established in order to help settle Jewish immigrants who came over from Eastern Europe. Around the period of the Second World War, HIAS became involved in helping to settle Jewish refugees from World War II. And then in the ensuing decades, it also turned to helping Jews come from other places in the globe to the United States, Jews from North Africa, from the Middle East, from Hungary, from Iran. In the post-World War II period, the largest wave of Jewish immigrants that HIAS helped resettle were really refugees from the Soviet Union, people who had been living there under a government that increasingly made life really impossible for Jews. And HIAS turned to hundreds of thousands of Soviet Jews and helped them settle in the United States, find jobs, find homes, and find communities. Recently, the American Jewish Historical Society sat down with the award-winning author Gary Steingart, who's written a number of books, including Absurdistan, Lake Success, and also a memoir called Little Failure, came over to the United States with his family in 1979 as part of that group of Soviet Jews. and his family settled in Queens with the assistance of Hayes. Together, we looked at some of the archives, and Steingart reflected on the memories that all of this brought back to him, and also on Hayes's mission.
There was a wonderful group of illustrated essays by children about age 10, age 11, Russian kids that came out for Hayes's, I believe, for its 120th anniversary. I love these. The theme was sort of looking forward to the next century, the 21st century, and there's a kind of science fiction-y theme to a lot of these. And my start in writing was writing science fiction when I was in Hebrew school. When I was in maybe 11 or 12 years old. I went to a not great Hebrew school. I'm not going to mention the Solomon Schuster School of Queens by name, but you can just imagine some school in Queens. I wrote these books and I read it in a Russian accent. They were books with titles like Invasion from Outer Space and The Challenge of the Cosmos, stuff like that. And I had a really great substitute teacher who was different from all the other teachers, and she allowed me to share these mini novels with the class. And I would read them in my accent, but my very first friends in America were kids who liked my stories. She made part of the last period of class Gary novel time, so I could read from my novel. So I have a very special affinity toward science fiction novels written by children, or any kind of science fiction written by children. And some of these drawings are just beautiful. There's one, this kid is so great. His name is Edward, and it's a astronaut with an American flag, because Edward is now American, holding the hand of a space alien. He writes, "My drawing shows an astronaut making peace with an alien. My symbol means that we should not only take care of our country, but our world too. There might be other life forms out there. It also shows the future hope that if we can make peace with an alien, we could try to make peace between each other." How sweet is that? And what a beautiful drawing too. Edward, age 10, is very, very, very talented and is able to describe things very succinctly. So that really brought, when I saw that from the Hayes archive, that really brought a lot of memories flooding back. And it was incredible that in Hayes, the mission expanded, so it wasn't just Soviet Jews. I remember, for example, there was a big interest in resettling Tibetan refugees who were fleeing the Chinese regime. So it was this great feeling of it's not just Jews helping Jews. It was a very expansive mission. The idea was anyone in the world who needed help, we would give them aid. Why does the plight of people affected by such a broad array of issues matter to Hayes? The simple answer is that Hayes, as the migration arm of the Jewish community, helps people in need, not because of who they are, but because of who we are as a people. I think that really sprung from the idea that Jews, having known the inhospitable lands and having been forced to migrate around the whole planet. I mean, recall that Jews were being saved in Shanghai back in the day, right? So everyone's constantly paying this forward and backward. So the idea that Jews would help people in other continents and not just Soviet Jews, our brethren, or so to speak, that was terrific.
In the Emerging Poet College category, Sophia Haber of Pomona College of Claremont, California.
Whither goest thou? A timbrel, a torch, every woman has her weapon. From sea to shining sea the women dance in one eternal circle, like Eve when she took that first breath and decided to be. On the shores of a new and old land, one bronze lady embraces her children, lets them roam her feet and heart and fingertips. Like a leper, she stands at the gate to the city. Milk and honey, red fruit and seeds, these tastes of promise linger on her warm and stoic lips. The moment they put her together, head on neck, rib over rib, she said, "Here I am." What does she hide in those serpentine robes? The severed head of Holofernes, Samson's flowing locks? No matter. Every woman has her secrets. Now the salty mikveh of the ocean laps at her toes, in and out, in and out. Forever she prepares to wed the promise of this land. I guess as I was writing, I was thinking about Jewish themes and Jewish tropes because they're part of my life and my experience. And that's what I think is very special about the Statue of Liberty, that while she stands for all of America, she also stands for each of us individually as Americans, and applies to our individual experiences. So just as I was reading my own context into the Statue of Liberty, I think that is the amazing thing about the promise of this country, that everyone can read themselves into her. I think about my family history a lot. It means a lot to me that my, progenitors were really involved in fighting for justice, specifically in unions. That my great-grandfather was involved in the founding of the Workmen's Circle, and then my grandfather carried on union work after him. In my family, the emphasis has really always been on justice and fighting for justice, because we really believe in it. The most exciting thing is that we're not really special in this, that so many people in this country have been striving for justice for hundreds of years, whether acknowledged or not.
We started the evening learning about Jack Weiler's Sukkah in the Sky. Sukkot is a harvest festival, and with your help and contributions, we're able to harvest the stories in our archives so that they can be useful to us today in the present as we build a new future. As you've learned this evening, Jack Weiler was a formidable fundraiser. He put his zeal and he put his passion into extracting what he could for the causes he believed in. I'm no Jack Weiler, but I believe passionately in the work of the American Jewish Historical Society and the values it upholds. If you're able to help us tonight, we would greatly appreciate it, and it would make our archives even more of a bountiful harvest than it is. Thank you so much to the many people who helped make this evening possible. Thank you to the Weiler-Arnow family. Thank you to Nikki Newman-Tanner, a past Emma recipient who chaired the dinner tonight. Thank you to our board, and thank you also to the AJHS staff who have done so much and have dedicated their passion and their lives to making these archives accessible. Our evening is coming to a close, but we hope your exploration into our archives have only just begun. Thank you, and good night.
Ya Ribbon Olam